I want our time. And, for husband and wives, if you're constantly on your phone, and let me tell you, I love Marketplace because Facebook Marketplace, I can find some great deals. But I also need to take that time and pour into my husband. Yep. Is there something I can do to be helping him? Is it, whether it may be, hey, go mow the lawn, hey, getting ready for whatever he's getting ready to do, you need to take that time and invest in him. Yep. Because it's so easy to get away from that.
Yeah, you only have one life to live.
That's right.
This week on Marriage, Life, and More, we get into part 2 of our first episode on marriage reset, going from roommates to soulmates. We'll be getting back into that right after this. Welcome to Marriage, Life, and More podcast. This is a podcast about marriage, Bible, and book studies, and we interview people that have inspiring stories. I'm Daniel Moore, your host. Thank you guys for joining us this week. Over here beside me is my gorgeous wife, Michelle. She's our co-host of this podcast, so thankful that she's here today.
Hey.
And if you guys are not familiar with our show, you can check out our website at www.marriagelifeandmore.com for our platforms. Our YouTube and Rumble links are there. We're also on the Christian podcasting app Edify, and we're also on your Alexa and Google smart devices. You can also visit us on social, on Facebook and Instagram and X at CTGap Online. And if you're a fan of our show, please subscribe. Feel free to leave a comment on our platforms. Give us a thumbs up or a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, and we'd be eternally grateful to you for doing that. Thank you guys for joining us. As we mentioned there in the intro, last week we started a brand new series called Marriage Reset. And this is something that Michelle and I feel that is very important to talk about on our marriage podcast here, because a true marriage is two people that are madly in love with each other and they want to spend the rest of their life together. They are intentional in everything that they do with their relationship. And when you start losing all of that, last week we talked a little bit about the little foxes and how they can get in there and they can start destroying those vines of marriage, those roots that you put into place whenever you first met and first got married. And over time, it can just disintegrate if you're not careful and aren't proactive with your marriage. And it can really change and go a very bad direction if you're not careful. And if you're in that mode right now, where you already feel like that you are just roommates in your marriage, well, this series hopefully will minister to you and maybe give you some things to think about and maybe some areas in your life that you can identify where you need to make some changes. So this week, we're going to continue with our very first episode, part 2 of that, Familiar Stranger, the one I thought I knew.
There's no question that serious issues like abuse, infidelity, and pornography and addiction can severely damage a marriage. We're not downplaying the deep pain and destruction these wild beasts can cause. If your relationship has been impacted by one of these serious challenges, seeking professional help is very crucial. Still, it's equally important not to dismiss another common and often overlooked threat to marriage: slowly growing apart. Time and time again, growing apart is mentioned as a key reason for divorce. It's the quiet fade that sneaks in through everyday life. Couples don't fall in love and stand before friends and family to promise forever and then plan to ignore each other emotionally. But over time, without attention or intention, passion wanes, intimacy goes untouched, and connection slips away. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual drift, often invisible until the emotional chasm feels too wide to cross. Soulmates transform into roommates, not by catastrophe, but through a slow bleed of emotional distance. Passion is exchanged for predictable routine. Intimacy gives way to apathy. Deep connection dissolves in polite science. Sex is swapped for sleep. Laughter and fun fade into boredom. Conversations get reduced to logistics and schedules. Peace shifts into quiet tension. Dreams, once shared and imagined together, simply fade away. Roommate marriages can carry the load of responsibilities, raising kids, paying bills, maintaining a home, but miss out on the rich, life-giving benefits that a healthy, connected marriage brings. Yes, being married often comes with advantages: financial stability, health insurance perks, certain tax breaks, and better retirement planning. But let's be real. No one gets down on one knee dreaming on joint tax returns. I certainly didn't promise Daniel forever for a better insurance plan. I married him because I long for life with my best friend, filled with passion, intimacy, laughter, prayer, encouragement, intentional connection, meaningful conversation, fun, shared vision, and spiritual unity.
And that brings up a pretty good point. I think, whenever we're getting married and we get down on our knee and will you marry me? We do the engagement thing or whatever. It's very interesting to think of it that way is, will you marry me for my joint tax return or my
financial stability?
Yeah, my better insurance policy because I get a family plan, and you get more phones on a phone plan. They get cheaper the more that, I guess if you look at it that way.
I don't know that anybody really does, but I mean, in the long run, you really think about it when you have two people.
Yeah.
The financial stability is there, and then one of us may have the better insurance plan.
Yeah, it's very possible. And I guess eventually down the road, if your marriage slips that direction, I guess that's all you're married for, I guess, is for the perks. I'm not quite sure, but that wasn't my dream, though.
I was going to say, I don't know that I've ever heard that. I mean, yeah, they're perks, but who thinks of those?
Yeah, I like how the cynicism was there in all of that. But it reminds me of, there's a song that was out a long time ago by Casting Crowns called Slow Fade.
Yeah, I remember that song. Yeah.
So that song was actually talking about our Christian walk with God.
Uh-huh.
And it was talking about how, it's not something that happens overnight. It's a slow fade that we end up in that spot with our life with Christ where it just seems like it just fades away. And, what used to, where we were in church every time the doors were open, we cherished our Bible reading time at home and our prayer time and all that kind of thing. And then over time, as the years passed by, we'd start sliding out of some of that stuff until we eventually didn't go to church anymore. We never read our Bible, never even cracked the cover, never did pray. We quit praying over our meals. It's just, that song is so true. It's just a slow fade in how all of that happens. And what's interesting to me, and since we started doing this marriage podcast, it's really reinforced inside of me to remember that, this marriage that you and I have between each other so much reflects the relationship between us and Christ.
Absolutely.
Because anything that can happen between that, we're the bride, we're the church, the bride of Christ. And so that slow fade that we can have in our relationship and our walk with God, that same exact thing happens between you and I if we're not careful, and it's a slow fade.
Yeah.
It's that the little foxes like we talked about last week. It's those little bitty things that piles up until it almost seems like it's unfixable anymore.
Right.
And you just decide to forget it and give up on it and move on. And that's not God's intention for our relationship, for our lives. That's the last thing that he wants for us to do in our marriages. But, unfortunately, many couples who end up in roommate marriages miss out on the beautiful experiences that they can have in their marriage. The term married roommates may look different from one relationship to another. Through extensive research, subtle patterns have been identified, small habits and behaviors that quietly lodge themselves into the relationship and slowly erode connection or start to slow fade, you could say. These are those little foxes that we started talking about last week, the seemingly insignificant issues that, if left unaddressed, can deeply damage and harm a marriage. So this week, as we mentioned last week, we're going to talk about 11 key behaviors that contribute to this slow fade between spouses. For some couples, one major dynamic might really stand out. For others, it might be a combination of several small habits that quietly disconnect you. It's important to realize that feeling like roommates isn't a black and white issue. It exists on a spectrum. Depending on your life stage, the impact of growing apart is going to look different. A couple with small children, they may feel it in the chaos of caregiving. A couple without children may experience it in different ways. You might just be going through a temporary season of disconnect, or you could be on the edge of a long-term disconnection without even knowing it. Wherever you find your relationship today, becoming aware of those little foxes that can create that havoc is a crucial step toward rebuilding that marriage that you deeply desire. And I think that everyone desires a good marriage or they wouldn't even pursue it.
Right.
I think that if you're going to go through all the work to try to win somebody over and to get into that relationship with that person that you feel like you're madly in love with, then I think that had to be a deep desire within your heart that you wanted. So you probably never intended to get to the point where it slowly faded away. Recognizing these issues gives you the power to respond proactively and to rekindle that love and intimacy and that joy that you at once cherished earlier in your relationship. So something I want you guys to do as you're listening to us today, this week on this episode, as we go through these 11 characteristics, rate your marriage on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being you don't relate, to 5, you relate completely.
I'm going to do this.
Are you?
Yeah.
I'm going to be in trouble.
So
we'll see how this turns out in the end.
So
we might be roommates and still not even realize it.
So I'm basing this on you or me?
This is based on how you feel about these points.
So like the first one,
so as we bring
example,
so this first one here, we'll just go ahead and get into them. Yes.
And I'm going to check mark it.
You'll rate that on a 1 to 5.
Oh, geez.
How bad you feel like that actually.
5 the worst?
5 would be, how did I have that? 1 is being you don't relate at all. Yes. And then 5 would be you completely relate. So like 2.5 would be right in the middle.
I'm afraid to do this.
So if it's bad, don't tell me. I don't want to hear it.
Now, this is based on me, though.
This is your opinion. So I guess when you're done, I can see if I agree with your opinion.
But the first one's, it's just me. I'm like, I can't even.
Yeah. And that's where if it's not marriage related, then it's not an issue.
Oh,
if it's something else that's causing it. So this is where you got to just discern, is this a marriage thing?
Or is it just
or do you feel like it's just an everyday life thing? So that's kind of how you rate
you make
that.
me exhausted sometimes watching you do everything.
Is that what it is?
Just kidding.
Well, that's not a marriage thing then.
Oh, okay. Just so that you guys know, Dan can run circles around me, and I'm just still back there on the first one while he's around me 15 times. I'm like, where did you go?
Yeah, I put the vroom vroom in our marriage, I guess.
Well, it wasn't that way until I had all my surgeries.
No,
so.
She used to run circles around me. I would tell her to slow down. So we've kind of flipped here later in life.
Not by choice for me, though.
Yeah. So we've got 11 characteristics here.
This is gonna be funny.
So you guys rate these, and we'd love to hear your responses. If you guys are willing to do this with us this week and write these down, and you can email us at daniel@connectingthegap.net or through the website if you want it to be private. If you don't mind, just let other people see how you came out and kind of compare notes. You can do that on our social media platforms as well. So the first characteristic here, that you might be a married roommate. Now remember, just because we're saying all these points doesn't mean that you're a married roommate. You've got to look at it from your marriage standpoint and decide, is it my marriage causing this point, or is it just life in general? So you have to determine. That's where this 1 to 5 thing comes into play. So the first one is exhausted. And what we say when when you're exhausted and exhaustion, we're saying that you're sleep deprived, tired, or burned out. The cause of your fatigue is often beyond your control and based on your circumstances or season of life. Realities such as raising kids, starting a new job or business, caring for an aging parent, a medical illness, or dealing with a special needs child leave you feeling exhausted. As a result, you are more sensitive, more easily offended, more confrontational, and more likely to say things that you regret. You are less likely to have the energy to invest in your spouse or your marriage. So where do you rate at on being exhausted? And this one is a big one because I remember even when we were younger, running circles with our kids, trying to get them to sports and jobs and trying to pay bills because we, back then the kids were in a lot of traveling sports, so that cost us a lot of money. And, being financially tight can be very exhausting in a marriage. There's just so many things that can just really exhaust
everything
you.
out of you.
Even if you're healthy,
a
good, healthy person. So like you, and we had an episode on all of your medical stuff and everything. And so how, after all those medical things that you've been through, how do you feel now?
I have stage 2 kidney disease. So obviously fatigue is always going to be an issue for me, but I also have lymphedema. So because of all that, I get exhausted easier. Let me just say that. And so I rated myself as a 2 on that, just for not necessarily, but I think it does affect our marriage. Mm-hmm. There are times that I feel like I'm so exhausted that I'm like, I just need to go lay down. I just want to sleep. And I think that can affect you and me because I'm not putting into my relationship because I'm well,
how easy is it because of your medical history and the things that you have going on, even with your job and stuff like that, that causes that exhaustion? How much easier is it for you to be irritable and pop off at me for something I say?
Yeah.
It's nothing to do with our marriage necessarily. And it's probably not really the fact that I said something really mean or, irrational to you or that kind of thing. It's just I caught you in a bad moment because you're so exhausted with everything else that's just something else that I'm piling on top of you now.
Yeah.
And so, I know there's times when you and I both have been really tired and really exhausted and we've not handled questions correctly that we've asked each other.
I agree.
Or conversations that we've had. But it wasn't a make or break thing where that was the end of our marriage.
Right.
It's just something that we had to come, like this weekend with moving our kids and stuff, it's been very exhausting because it's 100-degree weather here right now. And doing all of this out in the heat and the sun, it's very easy to get irritable and short-fused.
And when you go nonstop.
Yeah. Trying to work in everything else in between.
And our age, it doesn't really.
Our age, yeah. I'm only 52, but sometimes I feel like I'm 70. So I ripped houses in my younger years, and so my back and my lower waist sometimes gives me fits. But stuff like that, when it's combined, can actually cause you to have a bad reaction to something your spouse may say.
Yeah.
And so with that point, you just have to come back later and say, hey, just like this morning, we talked a little bit about it and apologized. I mean, it's just something, it's not a make or break thing, but it's something you got to fix. Now, however, if your marriage is exhausting you and it's literally a marriage problem that's causing the exhaustion and you're getting to the point where you're fed up and you're just tired of dealing with the other spouse, you're tired of dealing with marriage relationship issues, whatever those may be, if they're intimacy issues or emotional, maybe there's some abuse going on. There's lots of things within a marriage itself that can cause exhaustion that's not a good exhaustion. And that's something where you have to really decipher, well, is this part of why I'm a roommate now? Mm-hmm. Am I tired of dealing with it? If I'm just done with it, that's the attitude you get when you get so exhausted. I'm just done. Mm-hmm. I just can't do this anymore. And so with that being the case, you have to fix that.
Yeah.
What's the second one?
Busy. You feel like two ships passing in the night. It's easy to feel disconnected when priorities get misaligned and schedules are out of sync because the focus is on work, kids, housework, yard work, friends, hobbies, bills, church, and so on. Your hectic schedules and demanding responsibilities leave little time for each other. Spending quality time together has fallen to the bottom of your to-do list. Oh, wow.
This is a big one, a very big one. We talked a little bit about this earlier because even church ministry can get you in trouble with this busy thing. And how many times, and I want to bring this out, how many times, just in relationships in general, let's say with your relatives or, with casual friends that you have or whatever, they may come up and say, man, it's been forever since that I got to talk to you, or, you used to come over a lot, haven't seen you in a while, you've not been over. It's funny because almost every single time our first comment, well, I've just been busy. It's like,
you're right.
That is our go-to comment or our answer for all of those situations. And in reality, when you break it down, were you really? I mean, it's like we get to a funk sometimes, I think, where, I can sit, at night if I wanted to. I could sit at night after dinner and just watch TV all night if I wanted, and, just kind of relax and whatever, and just put all of my relationships on the back burner, never talk to anybody or whatever. That's not really being busy. But yet whenever they try to, they come up to talk to me and, well, I haven't seen you in a while or whatever. Well, my first call, I've been busy. I just got a lot going on right now. It's honestly, sometimes it's a lie, but that's a go-to answer that we give a lot.
And I think too, on this one, it could be seasons of life.
Yeah.
I think, it could be a 4 now and it could be a 1 later. Mm-hmm. So
that's
I think
a good point.
That could be definitely,
can change a lot.
Yes. I think all of these could probably.
And it could change a lot, truthfully.
Yeah.
You truthfully can be
Yes.
busy. I mean, that's not saying you can't be, but why are we busy? We put ourselves in that spot. That's the only reason that we get super busy like that. I think sometimes, like we was talking at the very beginning of last week's, I think it was, how what your and my life looks like, So to a lot of people, when we were talking about everything that you and I both do, they probably got exhausted listening to us because they're just not that type of person. They can do 1 or 2 things, and that's all they can handle.
Right. I think
but then there's other people
different.
that are like, well, I probably do 10 more things than what you guys said. And I keep, everybody's different in how they look at that. But when it comes down to it, no matter what we put ourselves into, no matter what things we take on in life as a responsibility that we have to take care of, or day-to-day activities or whatever it may be, I don't think that, especially in our marriage side of things, we should never have so much there that we can look at our spouse and say, we're too busy for you. I just don't think that should ever be an issue. We should always have time for our spouses. And if we can sit there and say that we're too busy for our spouse, then we probably need to start cutting something. Not your marriage, not your spouse. That's not what you cut. You start cutting some of the stuff off that's causing you to be too busy to communicate, too busy to live life as spouses, too busy to nurture that love and that intimacy and the emotional part of why you married that person. And so I think when we're talking about, busy here, this is a very good characteristic to watch for when it comes to the point of how do you look at your marriage? Are you actually a roommate, or are you a soulmate? Are you too busy to be a soulmate? What's causing that? So, probably need to shave some things off. So the next one here is pragmatic. What this one is, you have a business-like relationship as you do life together. Most of your communication is around administering your marriage, talking about to-do list, schedules, kids, finances, and so on. It's like a business. Your communication seems to have been relegated to short directives and curt responses. This leaves hardly any time for meaningful conversation where you talk about your inner life, your emotions, your needs, your hopes, your fears, and your dreams. So this one here is almost like I said, it's like you're running your marriage like a business, really. You're more business partners than you are being good spouses with each other. And so that's something that we really have to watch. I do know people myself that I feel like kind of runs their marriage like that to an extent. All they ever talk about is, paying the next bill or getting the kids to the next event or whatever, and they totally forget about each other. And, I think there was probably a point in our life, really, in our marriage, that we probably did that a little bit, because especially when our kids were so heavily into sports. Michelle and I used to coach our kids soccer for the City League. And then we also had some traveling time with a couple of our kids doing traveling soccer. And our daughter did show choir and cheer.
Yeah, and speech and debate.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so, when you have kids in the mix like that and they're going
And they
through
were
school.
busy in church stuff.
Yeah, church camp and church events and everything.
Yeah.
It's super easy for that to happen. And you don't think nothing about it. You think, well, I'm just nurturing my kids and I'm helping them grow up and be good kids and be involved and, want to enjoy things or whatever. And there's nothing bad about all of that, but there's still a balance. You have to have a balance in all of that. And I think there's some points, places in Michelle and our marriage where I feel like we failed to keep that balance. And we've talked about multiple times how we put our kids before each other. And God never set it up that way, and he didn't set it up that way for a reason.
Right.
Because if you allow that to happen, if you run your marriage like a business, then eventually you're probably going to run into those issues where you're just probably not going to be happy being together anymore because it's all going to be about trying to make enough money to pay that next bill or, all the business side of things and raising your kids and whatever it may be. You have to have time for each other and to build that relationship. Do you have anything to add to that one?
Okay. I do want to ask on this one right here. I mean, does it kind of go to, like, if somebody is on a schedule, like they schedule everything out? Is that kind of what this one is too?
If they're not scheduling their own time in that schedule.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically this one here is you're making sure all the business is taken care of in marriage with the kids and the finances and the home and all that kind of thing, but you're totally neglecting each other. You can schedule stuff for yourself. I mean, it's a known thing that some people need to schedule when they have sex and stuff. I mean, it's just depending on your marriage and that kind of thing. There's things that happen where you're better off where you schedule some of that stuff because that makes sure that it happens. Because some people get so busy, that even things like that doesn't even take place. And I know that sounds weird, and it's not something that Michelle and I do by any means. But I've been through multiple studies and multiple books about this kind of thing from different leaders in these industries. And a lot of them talk about that a lot because people struggle as spouses sometimes. They struggle to try to figure out where to fit themselves into the equation. It's a huge struggle for some people. And if they don't schedule things and stick to that schedule and just make it happen, then they have a tendency just to keep pushing themselves on the back burner. They will never attend to their relational issues and their emotional and intimacy issues. And then they end up in this state of not wanting to be together. And their marriage just falls apart. And so regardless of whatever it takes to make sure you take care of yourself, whether if that's setting up a schedule or whatever it may be, it's super important that you do it one way or the other to make sure you take care of that relationship. So go ahead and give us number 4.
Gentle neglect. You or your marriage is constantly taking a back burner to jobs, kids, friends, housework, and hobbies. And you feel ignored. You don't feel like a priority. Television, social media, kids, work, sports, and hobbies monopolize your evenings or weekend time. When you are together, your spouse is constantly checking his or her phone for texts, news, social media, or games, and you feel invisible.
So,
go ahead.
So this one's from like one spouse's perspective. Mm-hmm. One spouse is getting neglected. So go ahead.
I just feel like a lot of times, I don't think people realize this, but phones are a big issue. I don't think people realize when they go to sit down, whether it may be the dinner table, sitting in the evening at the, whatever, maybe
restaurants,
anything.
Yeah.
You see, if you do go to a restaurant, you see everybody on their phone instead of communicating. I cherish that time. And I feel like I communicate with Dan and say, I usually will say this, and it doesn't happen all the time. I'm not saying that. It's just saying, I'm not competing with your phone. Mm-hmm. And he's involved in like a lot of studies and stuff. So he's doing some of that stuff. So I understand that completely, but I want our time. And, for husband and wives, if you're constantly on your phone, and let me tell you, I love Marketplace because Facebook Marketplace, I can find some great deals, but I also need to take that time and pour into my husband. Yep. Is there something I can do to be helping him? Is it, whether it may be, hey, go mow the lawn, hey, getting ready for whatever he's getting ready to do, you need to take that time and invest in him because it's so easy to get away from that.
Yeah. You only have one life to live.
That's right.
You only have one time in history that you're going to be with that spouse, because we all know when we get to heaven, we're not married anymore. And so this is the place where we have to build that relationship and love that person like no other. And it's not a good thing to let those distractions get in the way.
Right.
And so if you're rating yourself on this one, you're going to rate yourself. Do you feel neglected? That's the rating that you're giving on this number 4 here. Do you feel like in your marriage that you're competing with the phone, you're competing with your kids, you're competing with activities and things that are going on, you're competing with church? Do you feel like that everything in your relationship in your life, you're constantly competing with that and you're just being ignored?
At one point in time, I would have put a 5 on that.
Yeah.
But now it's not even, it's a 1. I don't even relate to that.
And our first marriages were real similar to that also. Everything was more important than both directions. But so gentle neglect is another issue that you need to look for to determine, are you living in a roommate situation or a soulmate situation? The next one is complacent, and everybody knows what this one means. Many people work hard to win their spouse, and then over time they become comfortable. The initial excitement associated with getting to know a person, growing in intimacy, and trying new things as a couple can disappear as the two people settle into a routine. It's not that we lose interest in our spouse, we become comfortable. We don't feel like we need to make much of an effort. We've already won them over, right? The romantic spark fades or is replaced by the mundane. The marriage feels predictable and probably even boring. So where do you fit into that one? Being complacent is a very bad place to be. And again, this can mirror our relationship with God. This is another big one when it comes to how we treat our spiritual walk and our relationship with God. If we get complacent like that, it's very hard sometimes to even admit that we're being complacent. We just don't even want to admit it. And so, I think that in our relationship, we've definitely been there.
Oh yeah.
In that spot where we were complacent, we just kind of rode the tide and just did whatever, and everything was predictable with us.
Yeah.
We never had any spontaneity and just often do something. I think, we've worked kind of hard to try to not let that happen so much now.
Oh, definitely.
We'll just up and take off and go do things, or
the cruise.
Yeah, there's things that we try to do to make sure that doesn't happen again, because when you become complacent, that's a really quick one to know that you're just buddies. If there's nothing else there besides that. So what's number 6?
Spiritually distant. You rarely pray together, seldom talk about spiritual matters, hardly ever attend church together, don't have Christian friends that you hang out with together at church or in a small fellowship group. You don't feel equally yoked. The lack of spiritual intimacy has created a distance in your marriage, and you don't feel like you connect at a deep spiritual level or soul to soul.
And being spiritually distant, I think sometimes, even with couples that are going through bad situations, I think they forget about this part. I think once they start having marital issues and they're trying to concentrate on how to fix their marriage, that they really just forget about God and church a lot of times, not realizing that if they would stay in church and keep God in the middle of it, they probably could fix their problem a lot quicker. Because with having God in the middle like that, that's really the best thing that you can have to try to solve these issues that come up. If we stay biblical with our marriage, then that gives us something to score our marriage against, and to, challenge us to make sure that we keep it where it needs to be. And there's a lot of people I know that they just don't think it's important to keep their kids in church. They don't think it's important to keep themselves in church. You ask them, are they Christian? Oh yeah, I read my Bible every once in a while, and I pray over my meals and whatever. And they think that that's all it takes, to be a Christian. And we do know that all you have to do is ask God into your heart and ask for repentance. It's not hard to give your life to Christ, but there's more to it after that happens. You have to, at that point, you should care about being in God's presence. You should care about being around other fellow believers. And there's a lot of things the Bible teaches that God would like for us to do to help build that relationship with Him. And Michelle and I are both walking examples of what happens when you don't keep God first. And even in our first marriages, they failed too, I feel, because God was not there where He needed to be in those relationships. And so it's very, very important to make sure that you're not spiritually distant between each other. You got to stay on the same page and raise your kids in church. That's super important. So rate yourself on that one, on how you feel about being spiritually distant with your spouse in your marriage. The next one is conflict avoidance. You and your spouse evade difficult conversations, you sweep negative issues under the rug, or rarely bring an argument to resolution in a way that both people feel good about. When we avoid conflict, problems don't get resolved, and these small frustrations grow into big issues down the road. Avoidance decreases intimacy and creates distance because problems aren't being addressed and resolved. Over time, spouses stop trying to work things out and deal with their relationship problems individually. Ultimately, the strategy of avoiding problems blows up, and spouses feel resentful and alone. Do you feel like conflict avoidance is an issue?
No. Not at one point in time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no.
Not with us.
Nope.
We fixed that problem, thank
Communication.
goodness. I am one that doesn't like conflict necessarily. I will have it if I have to, but I usually got to be pushed into it for the most part. But we all know that in relationships, whether if it's just friends or if it's spouses or work-related relationships, there's going to be conflict.
Yeah.
And if you don't fix it, it just creates more problems. So you have to make sure that you don't avoid those conflict moments. It should be important enough to you. And of course, we've talked about this a little bit before also. If it's a situation where you're angry, you don't want a conflict when you're angry. So you do want to walk away from that for a little bit and cool off and try to get your composure together and then come together and have an adult conversation about those issues and try to fix those issues and conflicts that you may have. But if you do avoid that all the time and you just don't want to stir the waters or rock the boat, then you might be heading towards having a roommate relationship.
Well, it's just like this morning we were discussing something and Dan kind of knows my personality. He knows my personality 100%. And he was telling me something, and of course he can tell that I didn't like what he had to say. And so obviously we went a few minutes and then he come around, he's like, I don't want nothing between us. And he's like, this is, we have to be this way, and I'm like, okay, he could tell I was upset about it. And I know he's right, but there are sometimes I'm just like, don't you understand where I come from and my heart comes from? Because I'm more of I'm a generous person. When I know someone's in need or something like that, I try to help, especially my children. And sometimes that's just not always the best thing to do. And I have boundaries set, but sometimes I still want to do things. And so he was calling me on the carpet, and he was trying to avoid a conflict because it would have came to that, to be quite honest. And he would have had to at some point say something more stern to me. And so I feel like, we have that now where we both know each other enough to be like, okay.
Yeah. We can actually kind of read our mail between each other so that we can navigate through that and come out on the other side, hopefully with a good resolution.
Yeah. And that's it. It's not over till it's over for me. And it's like, okay, so there's still room to work there. He's probably like, no.
No.
So.
Conflict over.
But he was loving. He did it in a loving way.
Yeah. That's good. There's good, healthy conflict.
Yeah.
There's you just have to work through it and figure out how to take care of that, but just don't let it get out of hand.
Right.
So the next one's a big one, sexless. Sex is an important part of a marriage, and yet researchers estimate that 15 to 20% of U.S. couples haven't had sex in the past 12 months.
What?
In a sexless marriage, sex becomes routine, dutiful, infrequent, or non-existent. Sex only happens if it's on the calendar. Romance has faded, affection is absent, and foreplay is a distant memory. Certainly, there's a natural ebb and flow of a sexual relationship in marriage depending on what season of life you're in or the circumstances that you're facing. However, when we deprioritize sex, passion is replaced by boring routine, duty, or avoidance. Ultimately, spouses feel rejected, lonely, and resentful, susceptible to finding emotional and physical connection outside of the marriage. This is a very, very dangerous place to be. But yet, this is something that I feel probably happens quite often in marriages. Michelle and I's been through that stage of in our marriage in
not just
multiple
once.
ways.
I was going to say it's actually been several different times.
We've been through the sexless part just because we had a bad marriage. That was not good at all. But then later in life, after we fixed things and got back into a better state with our marriage and started working on everything and things were getting better, then your medical stuff happened. And we had a whole episode on that. And that, again, started causing issues with that part of our relationship. And that's something that, there's a point where if you don't have sex between each other just because you don't want to and you don't work on trying to have that intimacy part of your marriage and keep it spiced up and healthy, that's not a good thing because that is a big part of the relationship that God created for us to have. Right. And usually that does leave one spouse out in the dark that yearns for that, but they can never get it. And that is one of those longings that's very hard to take care of and ignore. And that's why so many people a lot of times refer to going to having affairs because they find somebody else that's in a relationship like theirs that they're being neglected and they're missing that part as well. Well, then they find out, well, the two of them can at least maybe hook up and take care of that part of each other's issues. And then the affair begins. And that's not a good place to be. Spouses have to talk about this when these issues come up and try to work through all of this and try to find out what is the root of why we're having these issues. What's causing us to not want this anymore? What's causing us to not be turned on by each other anymore or have that longing? You got to figure out what's going on there. Now, if it's a medical situation, that's something that at that point, the one spouse really needs the other spouse even more so to step up and be understanding and try to work through it together and be proactive with different things that you can do to try to help get back to that point where at least both are satisfied. And I think that, with Michelle and I, with the situations that we've been through, I think we've actually handled a lot of that very well between each other. God's really helped us through a lot of that. But is there anything that you want to add to that one? Okay. Just make sure that, if you're in a state in your relationship right now where you're part of that statistic, you've not had sex in over a year or even 6 months, really. If it's been a long time and you really don't know what the reason is, you just don't want to do it anymore, you're probably heading towards being a roommate. And that's something that we will talk about later. There's a couple of episodes that we're going to have just on this subject. Once we get further down the road here with this series. And just, be praying about that and ask God, to maybe reveal the root of what's causing all of that and to give you that desire back again, because that's one of the most important parts of your relationship. That's that physical connection that you guys have between each other. And you should never be okay with that. So what's the next one?
Disengaged. Your marriage feels like each individual is going in separate directions. It seems like the kids are about the only thing you have in common. Certainly, couples shouldn't be together 24/7. It's healthy to have alone time away from each other. We're not talking about good self-care here. Instead, is this roommate state most of your activities are done separately and you hardly see each other when you're at home? You have separate bedtimes, maintain separate checking accounts, sleep in separate rooms, take separate vacations, have separate hobbies. You feel like you're leading parallel lives. Over time, disengaged couples have nothing in common and simply exist in proximity to each other.
And I've always felt this way about this one. I don't understand why sometimes why people have separate checking accounts. I know some people have spending problems and they're addicted to spending money, and the other spouse has a very hard time keeping them from doing that if they're allowed on the account. I totally understand that there's some of those dynamics in place. Michelle, you work at the bank, and I'm sure you've seen that multiple times as you've worked down there in the many, many, many years that you've been a banker. But in all reality, if some of those issues are not in place, if you're just doing it because you're stingy and you're stubborn and you want all the control, really it's a control thing. And you have to understand when you come together to be married, you share. Michelle and I we have several accounts between the two of us, and both of us are on every one of them. And we both talk to each other, as we spend and the things that we do. And, that's something that we carry on as a conversation in our relationship all the time. And we make sure that we stay healthy with that. So the disengaged kind of goes along with complacent to a point, but this one takes it a little bit deeper where we was talking about this, I think, last week. Some of the people that they just do vacations on their own. They do all kinds of things without their spouses and just leave them behind. And, as we talked about, there's some times when that's okay, but there's some times when you really probably should be proactive in your marriage and do something together. It shouldn't be something that's completely separated all the time. And so rate yourself on that one and see where you're at. We got two more here. What's the next one? Number 10.
Unsafe. We live in a harsh world. Satan, our sworn enemy, is like a lion, constantly on the prowl, ready to strike. Work is stressful. Children are a handful. Friends disappoint. News is depressing. Social media makes us feel jealous and like we don't measure up. Road rage is widespread. Sexual harassment is our country's dirty little secret. Racial tension still exists. Political fighting is despicable. Terrorism is here to stay. Internet trolls are constantly spewing hatred. At the same time, our homes can be sanctuaries from disheartening chaos. However, for many couples, this relationship is not a refuge. The marriage feels tense or strained, and instead of feeling relaxed, you feel like you're walking on eggshells and feel apprehensive around your spouse. Instead of peace, anger is constantly rearing its ugly head. Instead of acceptance, you feel relentlessly nitpicked and don't feel free to be yourself. When you don't feel safe, over time, individuals will disconnect and hearts will eventually harden with the death blow for a marriage.
So speaking to that one just a little bit, because you've been in a situation before where you felt like you walked on eggshells and was nitpicked all the time and that kind of thing. How does that make you feel as a spouse?
We've talked about it before. You don't feel loved. There's no self-worth, no self-confidence. You literally feel like it gets to a point where everything's your fault, no matter what you do. When is the next comment coming? Where is it coming from? How hateful is it going to be? Why do you even exist? What's the purpose of it?
Yeah. And so in a lot of ways, that's, it's a very unsafe way to live because blow-ups could happen at any moment. You just don't know if you do something, it's going to set something off.
Yep. Yep.
So if you're in a relationship like that, you really probably need to evaluate where you are and why you're in that situation. Again, go back to the root of what you think these problems may be that's causing a lot of this. But as Michelle was reading in the first part of that, we already have to deal with so much stuff in the world today already. Outside of the scope of our marriage, there's so much going on. And so with that being the place, the home should be our place of safety. That should be a place that we can come to and get away from all of that and have a relationship there that builds us and helps us to grow, not tears us down.
Right.
And so rate yourself on that one, 1 to 5, where you feel you are in that situation on being unsafe. And that brings us to number 11, which is visionless. Most dating and engaged couples dream wildly of what their life will look like together, but then life gets busy. Juggling a marriage, running a household, balancing careers, raising children, and 1,000 other challenges cause big dreams to be set aside. Thus, you don't share a clear dream for the life you're building together. You don't have a vision of how you will use your oneness to serve God and bless others. And this is a big one because, as we discussed earlier in this episode here, and I think it might have been last week, that when we first get married, we think about those visions and those dreams that we have. And eventually down the road, all of a sudden, we forget about those dreams and nothing happens like we anticipated. It all changes. And with that, it can be a good or a bad change. And later on, we have an episode or two that we'll be doing on dreaming in your marriage and having a vision. And that's something that's very important in a relationship to make sure that it stays healthy, is to have a good, healthy vision for your marriage. You have to be proactive in planning and how to keep that marriage relevant, how to stay in love with each other as you go through the years. So with these 11 characteristics and attributes here of being a roommate, how did you rate each issue? Where did your rating come out at? Was there one particular issue that stood out, or was it a combination of several small struggles that left you feeling disconnected from your spouse, more like roommates than romantic partners? Maybe you recognized a few behaviors that are just beginning to show up, and you're hoping to stop them before they take root. You know, wherever you land at on this, self-awareness and insight are essential starting points. Gaining clarity on where things are going off course is the first step toward reconnection. Understanding the early signs of emotional drift is not only key to reversing the damage, but it's also crucial for protecting your relationship from falling into the roommate trap in the first place. You know, looking back on Michelle and I's story, we can clearly identify many of the subtle roommate-like behaviors that snuck into our marriage just by looking at that list. Yep. At the time, we were both drained, juggling the stress of dealing with exes in a blended marriage, raising 3 young children, and putting life circumstances in front of our relationship. We were depleted and began to operate on autopilot, offering each other only what was left after everything else had taken our time and energy.
Yeah.
Quality time together became nearly non-existent, and when we did talk, our conversations revolved around coordinating calendars, solving problems, or managing household logistics. The emotional connection we once shared had been quietly replaced by routine and responsibility. But the real turning point, the most damaging element, was the gentle neglect. You know, I vividly remember avoiding time alone with Michelle at times, convinced that it would either lead to another conversation about what I was thinking of, or worse yet, a pointless argument. Instead of leaning into our marriage, I checked out. The more I avoided emotional engagement, the more you felt alone in our marriage. You longed for connection, and my absence sent the message that you didn't matter. Our story mirrored what so many others experience. The symptoms were the same ones couples often list when they explain why their marriage ended. We were growing apart, struggling to communicate, giving each other less attention, and drifting out of love with many causes. The little foxes that we had overlooked, exhaustion, unresolved tension, emotional avoidance, and misplaced priorities, had crept in and quietly ravaged our vineyard of love. And this is how slow fades happen. Many marriages begin with strength and warmth. For a while, things feel great, love is strong, and connection seems easy. Then life speeds up, stress piles on, and the little foxes begin to nibble away. Things like fatigue, busyness, complacency, avoidance of hard conversations, mismatched priorities, and sexual disconnection. These are rarely sudden or explosive problems. Instead, they are persistent, quiet intrusions that weaken a marriage gradually. The danger of behaving like roommates isn't just emotional distance, it's the gradual loss of dealing with life together. Couples begin silently coping with their own frustrations and struggles in isolation. Emotional intimacy gives way to resentment or apathy. Instead of fighting for connection, spouses begin to solve their problems separately. They start leading parallel lives, managing the house, raising kids, and existing under the same roof, but no longer relating deeply to each other in heart, spirit, or even the body. This silent drift opens the door to loneliness, which is a far greater threat to marriage than many realize. So what was our score, or your score, I guess I should say? Do I want to know?
Actually, it was pretty good. It was a 14.
Really?
Yeah.
That's not too shabby.
No, and I think my
Because it could have been a 55.
I think that exhausted and busy were the two that I can just add a little bit more to.
Yeah.
Because that's, for me, that's how I resemble our relationship.
Yep.
Is there like a check? Like, if you're into this category, this is where your marriage is, blah, blah, blah. If you're way up here, you need some help and pay attention to your marriage. Basically,
with this one, it's just the higher the score, then the more likely you're probably heading towards being in a roommate relationship, is basically what this one was.
So we got 14 out of 55.
So that's not too shabby. I don't have a whole lot I got to work on, just a little bit. So, yeah, I'm thankful, honestly, where God has brought us, because at one point in time, we probably could have been around 50, probably. I don't know if we'd have ever tapped out at 55 or not, but it was probably awfully close, because we had a lot of problems in our earlier relationship and where we've been. And so, but we know with you guys, if you come up with your score and would like to share that, please do. We've got social media. You can email us, go to our website, marriagelifeandmore.com. There's ways there you can share it anonymously if you'd like to, but we'd like to hear from you and see where you landed on all of that. And as we go through the series here over these next months, we're going to be covering a lot of these issues that we talked about in these 11 characteristics.
Yeah.
And we're going to tear a lot of those apart and try to see if we can fix them.
Yeah.
Maybe kind of open some eyes a little bit with some things maybe that we can share that'll help you more understand where you are in your relationship and how to take care of that. So is there anything that you wanted to add to this week's at all? Okay. And this one, because it was 11 steps, kind of went just a little bit longer. But I think we got them all covered pretty well and got everything laid out there. And so what we're going to do is just go ahead and call a wrap on this week. We just pray that as we went through these steps here, that over this next week before we come out with our next episode, that it gives you something to think about as we get started more deeper into this series, and be a little proactive on where you need to fix things and work on things and make them better in your relationship. So that's going to be all for this week. And next week when we come back, we're going to be talking about, look here, we're going to be talking about the hidden cost of marital exhaustion. That's what we're going to start on next week. And we do know that a lot of times in marriage, we do get exhausted. And that was actually our first point in our 11 points that we just went through. And so we're going to tear that apart starting next week. So hope you'll join us. We pray that after this week that your marriage is stronger and your walk with God is closer after this episode. This is an extension of Connecting the Gap Ministries, and we pray that you have a blessed week.